a new idea I've got for a podcast I'm really excited about, positive feedback and just what it means to get it. And I want to tell some stories about me and my sister. My sister and I are very close. And this holiday season, I'm thinking a lot of family. So I'm going to tell you about me and my sister. And it's all coming up in episode number 12 of Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time. Hello and welcome back to Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time. I'm Michael Blackston. You're sitting in the passenger seat with me, and I am glad you came along with me on this road trip. We're going to have a little talk about 3 topics that I think might be interesting to you. If you hear some noise under my voice, it's just the noise of the road in the background, just like you would hear if you were in the car with me. And so that's why we call it Road Noise, and it's my audio journal where I just talk about whatever happens to be on my mind at the time. Let me preface everything right quick with, I don't know if you're going to hear anything weird, but episode number 11 of Road Noise was recorded on my way up to Winfield, Alabama. And this is the very same road trip as I was taking when I recorded episode number 11. But now I'm on the way back, and I have come in a triangle. I came from the house to Winfield, Alabama. That's when I recorded early in the morning on Monday morning, episode number 11. And now we've come almost an entire week. I've gone in a triangle. I went from the house to Winfield, from Winfield to Carbon Hill, which is just a few miles away, and from Carbon Hill to Cookeville, Tennessee, where I've spent the last couple of days, and now I'm on my way back, and it's Saturday night. So from Monday morning to Saturday night, I have been away from the family and on this road trip, and I'm going to tell you, it's been a hard one, because I don't like being away from the family that long. I set my business up as a traveling business, but I like to stay, 3 days, 2 nights away at the most, unless it's really busy. But this is right before Christmas, and the Christmas rush, as we call it in the granite industry, can get really busy. And it has been. But I've already gone off on a rabbit trail on this story. The reason I'm mentioning something what I wanted to mention to you before I get started with the topics on the podcast is, in episode number 11, if you go back and listen to that at the very beginning, I talked about how I've got some sort of a funky kind of bronchial thing going on. Well, I'm on the back end and healing end of that, but I'm still not completely over it, and we've got a Christmas concert at the theater coming up less than a week from now, on Friday night, December the 18th, and my voice is not quite there yet. It's still healing. And so I'm sucking on lozenges, and I've got one in my mouth right now, and I hope you don't hear too much of that coming through. It kind of makes my mouth mushy, puts a lot of spit in my mouth and stuff, and I'm going to try my best for that not to come through the microphone, and in the editing process, I'm going to listen very carefully to make sure any mouth noises I might make will be cut out, because that is one of my biggest pet peeves. In fact, I need to write that down, pet peeves. That'd be a good topic to talk about. But one of my biggest ones is mouth noises, smacking and swallowing and things like that. And when I hear podcasters doing it, I can't stand it. So I really try to pay attention to get as much of that out of my podcast episodes as I possibly can. So if you hear that and I miss it, then please accept my apologies and don't let it turn you off to the podcast. So what do you want to talk about, Michael? I want to talk about, first of all, a brand new podcast idea that I have. I've mentioned before, I think, on this podcast, that I've been considering resurrecting an old podcast. My very first podcast, it was called My Everything Arts. Or no, it wasn't. It was called The Everything Arts Podcast with Michael Blackston. And I just talked about arts, and I interviewed people. I only got to, I think, like 11 or 12 episodes of that one. And I interviewed some people and talked to some people in my local community, and ended up spending most of my time, most of the episodes with Tony King talking theater. And that's when I decided, I'm only talking to theater people for the most part. I can't really find a niche that I'm looking for in this arts thing. I wanted it just to be all-encompassing with the arts and just talk about everything from all of the arts. But I really focused on theater, so I decided to shut that one down and begin a brand new podcast that just focused on theater with Tony King as my co-host because we had a good chemistry and people seemed to like that. So we've got Q1 Go, the theater show, which, by the way, if you're a crossover listener and you're wondering where's the next episode, where's episode 24 of that, it's coming. Tony and I have been extremely busy, and yeah, we're behind. We're probably 2 weeks behind now, I think, on that podcast. We haven't recorded anything because she's been directing a show at the theater. I've got this show coming up that opens curtain on Friday, although it's only 3 shows one weekend. And on top of that, we've both been very busy with our daily lives as far as work and everything else. So it's just we haven't been able to put the time together to get together and record a new episode. So we haven't forgotten Q1 Go if you're a listener. We just have been so busy. I can do these because I do it while I commute. So I shut down the Everything Arts podcast and decided that I would just let it go. Well, it originally was going to be a podcast that was helpful, that people could find value in, that artists could take and listen to and get great ideas, but it just never seemed to work. I couldn't get anybody interested who wanted, other than Tony or people involved with the theater, interested in getting on mic and talking to me. That's why I shut it down. But there's been this thing in the back of my head that just keeps needling at me, making me want to revive that podcast or something like it. But I decided, and if you listen to some back episodes of Road Noise, I decided that I wasn't going to necessarily do that because I'm trying to make better use of my time, prioritize the time that I do have to be useful. But I want to help people. I love helping people. And it just kind of washed over me all of a sudden yesterday while I was etching on this huge obelisk, 4-sided spear black granite obelisk. It looks kind of like a miniature version of the Washington Monument. And I was etching on that for a veteran who was an artist of all sorts. He reminded me of myself in a lot of ways, with the exception of the veteran part. I didn't serve in the military. But he loved photography, he loved to write, he was a journalism major. He loved music, he loved to play, he loved to sing, he loved to write music. And he was also an artist that painted all the way around. He just loved all sorts of arts. And he reminded me a lot of myself after talking to the family and learning a little bit about this gentleman. And while I was etching his stone, it just washed over me all of a sudden what I want that podcast to be. Because the problem wasn't how to get the podcast going. I've got a couple now. I've had that one in the past. That's nothing new to me. I know how to make a podcast. But this time, if I was going to do it, I wanted to make it something that could grow, that would have a wide range of interest, but be niched down enough to focus on something that was useful and not just a shotgun effect, like spraying a sawed-off shotgun on a wall from 50 yards or whatever, where all of the pellets just go in a big wide spray. I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to have a fairly targeted niche, but that would be interesting to artists of all sorts. And I couldn't figure out how exactly to do that, and at the same time be useful and be helpful, be something people could go to and say, this benefits me, this is great for ideas, this inspires me, this lights a fire under my butt to get going. There was also a part of me that wanted to help people learn how to start their own business. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. My business is my business. I own it. I run it. I'm the sole owner operator of it. And I love that. The freedom that I have from running my business for almost 10 years now has enlightened me on so many areas, and I'm really an evangelist for entrepreneurship and getting people to think about starting a company of their own. I wanted that to be a part of whatever new podcast I did as well. I just wasn't sure how to marry it all together until yesterday. And it hit me, and now I think I know what I want to do. I'm still going to do some kind of market survey type of things with some of my peers on Facebook and social media and stuff like that, and get their ideas to see if it's something they would be interested in. I have a Facebook group called My Everything Arts, and you're welcome to join it if you would like. You have to request to be accepted, and I am the sole administrator of the Everything Arts group. It's a group dedicated to helping artists of the artist community. You don't have to be any certain type of artist, but I do ask that you would be an artist of some sort. And what it's about is helping each other and lifting each other up and encouraging each other. And I'm going to ask that group and see what they think. So let me tell you what this podcast is going to be now, because if you are interested at all in this, you're saying, shut up, Michael, quit going around and around. Actually, tell me what your idea for the podcast is. Well, I haven't done the research yet to see if there's another one like it or something similar in title, but as it stands now, the title's going to be something to the effect of The Artist Brainstorm, something like that. I love the idea of brainstorm because it conjures up the idea of force and action and movement, and that's kind of what I want. I want even the name to inspire people and also be something people would look up in a search engine. So I like The Artist Brainstorm as a title for the podcast, at least so far, and here's why. I'm just hoping to goodness there's nobody else already using it. I'm sure Brainstorm is being used in a lot of places, but hopefully not in the artist front. But here's what I've decided I wanted to do, and why. I told you that I like helping people. Well, I've noticed that here lately I have had a lot of my peers in the art world, and not even necessarily in the art world. Some of them have been not artists, but have been people who've been looking for employment, who have kind of talked to me about my business. How did I get started? How did I find the courage? What did I do? What kind of ideas did I have then that kind of catapulted me into the idea of going on my own and starting my own company? How did I go about doing it? What type of marketing strategies would I have that I could pass on to them that maybe they could think about doing something similar in their own passion? I was doing some consulting. Basically, things that people get paid for, I was doing for free, which is fine. I'm not going to charge my friends for advice. But it dawned on me how much I enjoy helping these people and giving them good ideas. And every time I would, they would seem so grateful, and they would seem a little lit up, passionate after they finished talking with me. And I said, there's something here to that. And that's what I want to do with this podcast. I know now that what I'm going to do is I'm going to contact, starting off with the people I know, but it's also, hopefully, I would like it to grow into something that, people are contacting me to be a part of. What I want to do is I want to find artists who are passionate about making their art medium the way they make their living. I want people who want to do it but aren't really sure how, and what I want to do is sit down with them one-on-one, either face-to-face or via Skype, in a podcast recording studio situation, but at the same time basically sitting around the brainstorming table and giving them a consulting session. I heard Pat Flynn of the Smart Passive Income podcast do this the other day, and I think that's where the spark kind of lit in my mind. He aired a consultation phone call with one of his clients because normally he wouldn't do that, but the phone call was just so good and had so much good, juicy meat in it for entrepreneurs that he asked the guy if he could share it as a podcast episode, and the guy said, yeah. And I thought then that's a great idea, but at the time I didn't lock it together with anything I was planning to do. But that's what I want to do. I want to consult with artist friends and offer them, hey, we're going to sit down for an hour. We're going to talk in this podcast format. I'm going to record it, but we're going to sit down. If you're really serious and passionate about your craft and you want to honestly make a go at making it your life, we're going to sit down and brainstorm it and see what we can come up with to get you started. And then I'm going to have recorded those consultations, and then I'm going to air them as podcasts. I think that will be not only extremely interesting as an artist, I would love that, but I also think it will be of such great value to other artists because everybody's going to come to the table with a different idea, with different little quirky things, and that you may be able to listen to and apply to your own business that you have going, or maybe it will even spark your own fire to say, you know what? I would love to make my living doing what I love. I think that's what I want to do. Like I said, I'm going to ask some questions to some people around, see if it's something that would spark some interest, but I think I'm going to give it a go. And maybe sometime early part of the year, maybe towards the middle part of the year, depends on what I got going on. I want to get the branding and everything ready to go. When I launch this podcast, if I launch this podcast, I want to launch it big. I want to launch it big with several ready to go in my pocket so that I'm not scrambling and giving you subpar quality. Quality is everything, especially when you're doing stuff about business and you want people to take you serious as a voice and an expert on a subject. You want to make sure you give good quality. And I want it to grow, and I want it to be something that just lends to you liking and trusting me as you listen. So pray for me there if you're the praying sort, and be looking out for something along the lines of the artist Brainstorm. And that's going to be a podcast. I'm not sure if it'll be monthly or every other week. I don't think I've got the time to make it a weekly podcast, but I may be able to do it every other week. We'll just kind of see how it goes. But that's what I've got in mind for my next podcast, and I'm excited about it because I think really it can be a turning point not only for other people's career, but for mine as well, because it's the type of thing I want to be known for, and it's kind of a vehicle for kind of a new avenue of life that I'm looking to going down, and that is the journalistic kind of self-help, but not the get-rich-quick kind of guy, but a guy that gives you good value. So be thinking about me when you say your prayers at night and ask God to direct me in the right way for that. That brings us to our next topic, which is positive feedback. This topic comes to me because I'm insecure. I'm an artist. I'm insecure. What that means is it doesn't matter how good I do, how wonderful people think the content I create or the projects or the artwork that I create, no matter how good they tell me it is, I always feel like it's subpar. I'm just an insecure person. So when I hardly ever get negative feedback. In fact, with podcasting, I've never gotten negative feedback. The problem is I don't get any feedback. Now, I know you're listening, and especially this podcast. This podcast is surprising me at how much it's growing. It's not growing by leaps and bounds, but every single time I release another episode, I get more listeners. That means I'm doing something right. There's no way to actually tell just exactly how many people are listening and how many people are listening all the way to the end and where everybody is. I could pay for some of that stuff, but they've never really come up with a perfect way to track that stuff, and so I don't really pay that much attention to it, but I do watch the trends weekly, especially the first couple of days after I release an episode, and it's been climbing. So I know that people are listening. You're just not giving me feedback, and that's okay. You don't have to give me feedback. I don't want you to feel bad about that. But people that are insecure, when you don't get any feedback, you start to wonder. Regardless of what you know about the facts and statistics, as an ex-radio guy, I know that the people that call the radio station are only a very small, like single-digit % of the people who not only listen to you, but like to listen to you. There are radio DJs who people turn in just to listen, or tune in just to listen to them as the DJ, and never once make a phone call to tell them good, bad, whatever. They just listen. They're just fans. And I know that's the case. But when nobody calls, you start wondering, is anybody out there? Thank goodness I do have the stats to track, because I can tell that the show is growing a little by little, and people are, the listenership seems to be growing a little bit every time I release an episode. Or I would be starting to wonder if I was even reaching anybody on this podcast, and I would be wondering if maybe I shouldn't shut it down. Now, I'm not thinking that. I really enjoy doing this podcast, and I enjoy the prospect of knowing that although you're not talking to me specifically, and I will give you the ways to do that as I do at the end of every podcast. I'll give you the ways to get in touch with me, and I would love to hear from you. But even if you don't, even if you just want to keep your distance, that's fine. I do have a way to track you just a little bit, and I know you're out there. So I appreciate you so much. First and foremost, thank you so much for being there and for listening, because even though right now the recording equipment is my computer with this microphone plugged in, and that's sitting in your spot in the passenger seat, in my heart, you are in the passenger seat with me, and I'm carrying on this conversation. You're keeping me company on all of these long road trips, and believe me, tonight I need your company. It has been a lonely week, and I am tired, and I need your company. So again, thank you for being there. But recently I started a new blog, and I'm proud of the blog. I release articles twice a week, and they're comedy. They're all just goofy. They're me saying stupid stuff and coming up with these outlandish ideas. It's just my personality coming out, and people have told me in the past they like reading that, and so I decided to do it. And it's part of branding Michael Blackston, and so I've released it. And now I've got about 11 or 12 blog posts out there, but they just don't seem to have any legs, and I've only got a few out right now. But it only seems like my mom and my sister and my wife are the only ones reading it. Now again, statistic tracking is very difficult to do. I'm not by any means a pro at it. I'm probably an amateur's amateur. So I'm sure more people are reading them than I think they are. But even if they're not, blogs statistically start off very slow, and it's only the ones that stick around for 2, 3, 5 years that really start to pick up momentum like a snowball. And the more momentum you pick up, the more you gain, and it just gets bigger and bigger. So I'm going to stick it out, but it's not easy. I get very insecure. And I was thinking the other day, I wasn't thinking about dropping the blog or dropping the podcast, but I was just thinking in the back of my mind, why am I doing this? Is it just because I'm a narcissist and I like going back and listening to myself, and I like going back and reading my own posts? By the way, if you do want to read the post, just go to michaelblackston.wordpress.com. You can also press the blog button on the www.roadnoisepodcast.com homepage. The blog button will also take you to that WordPress blog. Just in case you're saying, Michael, tell me the name of your blog, I want to go read it. But I was sitting around wondering, is there any point to this? And just as I was in the depth of my kind of negative mood for whatever reason, a friend of mine commented on my latest blog post and gave me the old LOL, or she's actually a younger lady. She may have said, haha. I think that's what the youngsters do now. Ha-ha. Either way, she said LOL or haha. And she said, these always make me laugh. Thanks. And it was simple. It was just not much. It was just a nice, quick, little, to the point, positive reinforcement feedback comment. And it made me feel like $1 million. It answered that question for me, is it worth it? And because this person told me, and this person's very dear to me, she's one of my former cast members in a show that I did, and she's just, I'm watching her grow as an actress, and she's a young teenage girl, and she just got so much promise, and I love to know that I'm affecting people like that. And so when she wrote that to me, it just made me feel so good. And then I saw something on Facebook, and you've probably seen this crawl across your page as well. There was a picture of I thought, a very beautiful young lady with short hair, and but beautiful, short, kind of pixie cut hair, it looked like. On one side, it had her just looking straight on. And then the other picture was a photograph of her face after someone had told her she was beautiful. And the smile and the sparkle in her eyes, she was beautiful to start with. In that first pic, I thought she was gorgeous. But when she smiled, it brightened my day just looking at that Facebook picture. And so 2 things right back to back like that, both of them on Facebook. Thank you, Facebook. And it started me wondering why I don't give any more positive feedback than I do. And it made me decide that I'm going to start giving more positive feedback, because it just makes people's day. If someone has that poochy lip look on their face and you're wondering, well, who peed in their cornflakes? Instead of getting mad at them like I like to do, because I don't like negativity, I'm a positive type person, but I'll get negative thinking about how much I don't like someone who's portraying a negative attitude. How stupid is that? Instead, why don't you decide to put a smile on their face? You don't have to go up to them and say, put a smile on your face. It doesn't have to be like that at all. Just come up with something that is not creepy, but a compliment. Something to make them smile. Give them a reason to smile. I've talked about being nice in the past, but this is going beyond that. This is purposefully finding those people that you can tell are not having a great day and making their day better. Saying, I'm going to be the person who makes their day better. I want to be that change in their life. I want to change their outlook on this day. It's an important thing, and I think it's something that this world needs very, very desperately. So I'm going to try to do that. I'm not going to hang out too much on this topic. I just want to tell you that I'm going to try to do that more. I have tried, if you listen to one of the back episodes, and I'm talking about how I treat waiters and waitresses, because I'll put up this wall if I don't know you, trying to be Mr. Cool sometimes. I've made a specific point of smiling at people and being nicer, and it has made a huge difference. So I'm going to take it up a notch further, and I'm going to look for people who don't appear to be having a good day, and I'm going to try to put a smile on their face. Again, not in a weird way. I'm not going to go up to some 12-year-old girl and say, you sure are beautiful. You know, mom's not going to be very happy with that. But you know what I mean. I think you can figure out where I'm coming from with this. Put a smile on someone's face. And then the last thing I want to talk about, I'm liable to spend a while on it. I'm going to talk about me and my sister. I've talked about her before in the podcast when I talked about putting the do-it-yourself nutcrackers together, but I really didn't go into a whole lot of detail about me and my sister. My sister is 5 years older than me, and she's always been there. I mean, my mom was a single mom for most of our childhood. My dad was around, and we had our weekend visitations, but for the most part, my mom raised me and my sister. And early on, we didn't have that great a relationship, no more really than any brother or sister do. Some are closer, some are not. But later on in our relationship, we got very close. And one of the things that has brought us so close together has been doing theater sets and things like that. She's artistic as well. She's a member of the My Everything Arts group. If you see Stephanie Fields, that's my sister. Well, recently I've spent a lot of time with her putting together the parade float for the theater, and I still have not found out who won the prizes. I don't think we did because nobody called, but we were really hoping that we were going to be thought of for one of the first, second, or third place prizes, because here in the recent past, the parade in our local town has just left a lot to be desired. People were putting bows on trucks, and that was pretty much it. You know, it's 5 minutes long, and that was it. And so we wanted to be a part of making that change, because back in the day, the Christmas parade was, and the homecoming parade was a big deal. People put a lot of thought, effort, and creativity into those floats, and we wanted to be one of the people who made a difference. And it turns out this year, several people did. There were several floats in the parade that really stood out and were good, and so we were kind of happy with that and glad not to win, because our whole point was to bring a beautiful parade to the community. And she helped me with the parade float for several days. And I mean, Stephanie doesn't just get there and piddle around. Stephanie gets to work. Stephanie gets dirty. Stephanie ruins clothes and bleeds. She's just like me. We get our hands in there, and when we are done at the end of the day building a set, or in this case a float, which was basically the way we did it, a moving set, we are so tired. I mean, there's no problem falling asleep at night after we have been working on a project like that. And those types of things have brought us really close together here in the past few years, as she's helped me with the productions of shows that I've done, and I've been the set director, and she's pretty much been my right-hand person and been right in there with me. In fact, the only thing she doesn't do that I do when it comes to these shows is design them. I usually have the design in mind. Of course, a lot of times she'll throw up ideas that are better than mine, and we'll run with that as well. So she's not as much an assistant as she is just a partner with me in this stuff. And again, like I said, it's brought us together. And I just thought a lot about me and Stephanie in the last few days, because I'm 42. She's 5 years older than me. That's all I'll say. If you want to do the math, you can. And if you can't do that math in your head real fast, then shame on you. You need to take a class. Anyway, we've had there are a couple of stories in our lives that keep popping up. We like to tell them. They're funny. And she and I, when you think back on it, I think, we haven't been partners in crime that long, but then I think back on it, and all of the different times through our childhood and young adulthood that we have kind of gotten into some messes and had to get ourselves out of them, it's pretty funny. I remember one of the first times my mom left Stephanie in charge of me and walked out the door and left us home alone. Now, where I grew up, we had woods on both sides. We lived in a house with woods in the very back of the house, a little small area of backyard, and then woods, a fairly large expanse of woods before you got to the next neighborhood. And a big creek with a ravine, too. And then across the road, right across the road from the house, was another large expanse of woods. And so we were in the woods quite often at the house. We also rode our bikes. Back in those days, in the early 80s, we would ride our bikes all over the neighborhood. It'd be dark before Mom would know where we were. We'd hear her voice calling us in, and we went in. That was it. Well, she left us by ourselves for the first time, or at least one of the first times, and I specifically remember, it's one of those things where I can remember everything just about, almost to the pictures on the walls. Well, it was my house. I guess I would remember the pictures on the walls, but you know what I mean. It's a very vivid memory. My mom walking out the door and saying, "Stephanie, I'm leaving Michael with you. I won't be gone long. Don't get into any trouble. Keep the door locked, and do not go outside. Especially don't go outside and in the woods." "Yes, Mother," my sister said, and angelically closed the door behind her, watched her get out of the driveway and out of sight. At which point my sister decided we were going to go outside to the neighbors and see if they wanted to play games in the woods. The neighbor kids at that time, we didn't always play with them. We became bitter enemies later on in our childhood, but at that point we were playing with them. And decided we were just going to go outside and play. And I remember the game really well that we decided to play while my mother was gone, and we were supposed to be locked up safely inside the house. We decided to play, half of us go in the woods, the others stand in the road just on the outside of the woods and chunk large rocks into the air and see if we hit anybody. You may think I'm kidding, but I'm not, because we were kids and we were stupid and we did stuff like that, because in our minds is, look at all these woods, there's no chance they're actually going to hit us. Now, in my mind's eye, I hear the large granite rock, it felt large, whistling through the air like a bomb. In real life, it would not have. It probably hit a few leaves and branches on the way through the canopy of the woods. It probably sounded kind of like as it was coming toward me. But the oldest boy of the neighbors chunked a huge rock, and it hit me square in the forehead and cut my forehead open, and I began to bleed. Now, we had to go in the house at that moment. Stephanie wasn't sure what to do. I'm not sure if this was the same incident that happened when Stephanie punched the window out because she was mad at me. But for the sake of this story, I'm going to say that it is, because it may have been, because I think I was fussing at her. And I'm going to tell Mama. And you're not going to tell Mom. And she was trying to get me to not tell Mom what had happened, to come up with some sort of story. And I made her mad. And then she turned around and punched a hole in the window that was in the door, thus really making it worse. So Mom leaves us for just a few minutes and comes back to a hole in the window, I think. I know she did at some point. And her youngest child bleeding from the head and crying. And you wonder why I hesitate to leave my children alone. I've got an 11-year-old boy, and from time to time I'll leave him alone for 5 minutes. And those 5 minutes, oh my goodness, I know 11 is not really, to me, it's not really old enough to leave anybody alone, but there have been times I've had to run out, ran to Dollar General, left him there playing his video games, locked the doors. He knows not to open it to strangers and whatnot. And it killed me the whole time. I was a nervous wreck. Then another time I remember, this is one of the ones my sister and I really laugh about whenever we tell the story. We were adults, but we were living in South Carolina at the time, and my sister was an adult at the time, but was living back with us. And I had a glass of milk. Either I had it or she had it. I'm not sure who was drinking the milk. But we had this console phone that had one of the little tape players in it for the answering tape. It was a fairly nice phone for the time of the early 90s kind of time frame. And I spilled, or she spilled, one of us spilled an entire glass of milk all over the telephone. And my mom was sitting right there on the other side of the couch. And my sister was between my mom and the couch. Was between my mom and the phone. But my mom was so oblivious that she didn't see it. So Stephanie and I look at each other, and we never said a word. We didn't have to say a word. We communicated as brothers and sisters can do through some sort of paranormal kind of psycho thought. I can't remember what the word is. I am getting too stinking old. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. She looked at me, I looked at her, and we knew what to do. We went and grabbed towels, and we carried on conversation. One at a time, we would get up and go grab a towel and wipe up. We worked this thing for several minutes, and my mom never knew the difference. She sat there the whole time, didn't know we'd spilled milk all over that phone. Little by little, we mopped it up, wiped it up, and got it cleaned up. And as far as we knew, everything was hunky-dory. My mom was none the wiser, and what she didn't know couldn't hurt her. Until a couple of days later, and my stepdad picked up the phone and decided he needed to make a phone call. And it was a push-button phone. And the buttons wouldn't work. They were stuck together. They were sticky. They just wouldn't push. And he said, "What is wrong with this phone?" Well, most people who have a situation like that might throw out the phone, but not my stepdad, who is very adept at electronics. He takes it apart and finds all of the inner workings gummy with old spoiled milk and dried milk. And, of course, he yells, "Who spilled milk all over the phone?" And Stephanie and I had to kind of admit it and come clean at that point and say, "Well, we tried to clean it up." And Mom said, "When did this happen?" And we said, the other night you were sitting right there. You never knew. We thought we'd gotten away with it. Why am I talking like Jerry Seinfeld? We had a good time with that, and that's one of the stories we like to tell. There's been a lot of stories that my sister and I have gotten into, things that we've done. She'll Never Let Me Live Down. This is the last one I'll tell, and then I'll be done because I'm almost 45 minutes into the show. We were doing one of our shows. It was one of the first ones we did together set-wise, and the first really big project Stephanie and I worked on together. She was helping me with the set for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at the Hart County Community Theater in Hartwell, Georgia. And that stage is as big as a postage stamp and not much bigger. And there's no room in the wings. I mean, it's just tiny. And we had a nearly 40-person cast, all teens or adults, with the exception of, I think there were 6 or 7 kids in the children's choir, but the rest of them were all adults or teens. And we were going to cram them all on that stage. And so I had the stage designed to be built in levels, and so that we could kind of stack people up on the stage at times when they all had to be on there together. And there's a part of Joseph in the show at the very end where Jacob comes to Egypt to see Joseph, whom he thought was dead, and realizes that he's now sort of the Pharaoh's right-hand man and leader of the Egyptians, and Joseph comes to meet him in his chariot of gold. Those are the lyrics. Joseph came to meet him in his chariot of gold. We wanted a gold chariot. We wanted to close the curtains, and when we opened them back up to Jacob coming to Egypt, we wanted Joseph to be standing there in his chariot of gold like they do on the Broadway show with the Broadway set. Well, I had the plans, and it was going to be great. It was going to be beautiful. I built the framework out of chicken wire and plastic conduit so that I could bend the conduit into a U shape and then attach it together to hold that shape in the back with the little connections that you can get for plastic conduit. And then the chicken wire was the front of it, at which point we were going to place individual scales, golden scales, so that it would look like golden plating, almost like fish scales, golden plating all over this chariot. So we cut out, I don't know how many cardboard scales, hole punched them, sprayed them gold, and Stephanie worked on that chariot for a couple of days. I mean, hours and hours and hours. She zip-tied layers and layers of golden scales on it so that it would look like this great thing. Only for me to make the last-minute decision not to use it. The Golden Chariot of Joseph. I think I'm going to write an entire blog post about that because Stephanie reads the blog, and that's a story that I think I'll go into a lot more detail on when I do the blog, so you'll just have to look that up. Again, that's either you can push the button on the homepage of the Road Noise podcast website or go to michaelblackston.wordpress.com and read my blog, but I might make that a blog post here coming up fairly soon, because I do like to talk about my theater adventures, and that particular production had a lot of stuff to talk about in it. But she won't let me live it down. Every time we do a new set or something, she always throws it in my face. This isn't going to be another chariot, is it? I'm not going to work on this for hours and hours, only for you to throw it away and say we're not using it. And it wasn't that she had done a bad job. She did a fantastic job on the chariot. It looked great. It's just that my measurements weren't right in the section it was supposed to go in. And we were not educated enough in building sets and doing things right to check everything before we went and started going the whole 9 yards, making everything. I mean, we could have made some adjustments to the chariot and made that work, but I didn't do that. I just said, hey, go start with this, and we put the rest of it up, and it just didn't fit, and we didn't have time to move it or anywhere in the wings to hide it, and it just became something that we couldn't use, and it broke her heart because she was proud of her chariot and she worked so hard on it. And I'm sorry, Stephanie, if you ever listen to this, I'm so sorry again. and again for that chariot. So that's the episode number 12 of Road Noise, Life 1 Mile at a Time. My name is Mike Blackston, and if you would like to get in touch with me, here are the ways you can do it. You can call the hotline at 706-389-0401. That's 706-389-0401. Give me a call. Just make sure that when you do, you reference the Road Noise podcast, so I'll know which one to address how to address all the stuff that you're talking about. If you decide to do that, leave me a voicemail that way. You can also email me at roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. That's roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. Be glad to hear from you that way. You can follow me on Twitter at Everything Arts. Join my Facebook group, My Everything Arts. If you're an artist, I'll have to approve you, but just let me know that you heard about it on the Road Noise podcast, and if you say that, then send me a little message when you try to join, then I'll know that you're not a robot, and I won't deny you. Just keep it clean. I'm also, I have a Road Noise podcast Facebook page. That is at facebook.com/Road Noise Podcast. And what else? Let's see. I feel like I'm leaving something out. I told you about the blog. Told you how to get in touch with me. Email, phone number. I'm on Tumblr. Look for Michael Blackston on Tumblr. I'm on Instagram. Look for Michael Blackston on Instagram, although I'm not that active. I've got a Google Plus page. I think I'm Michael Blackston there. So just look me up in the different social media places and you'll be able to find me. Other than that, until next time, thank you so much. I've needed your company on this trip. I'm almost in Atlanta now, and so I need to be putting up the microphone and paying attention to traffic a little better anyway. So thank you again so much for being a listener. I would love for you, by the way, one last request. Go to iTunes, leave me a review, and until next time, until our next road trip, I'm Michael Blackston, and this is Road Noise, where we're learning to live life 1 mile at a time.